All right, ready? 1 Samuel chapter 17. All right, you got your Bible, Megan? So we start with David. Left off where Saul became king. Now David is not king, but we'll see how he becomes, and God prepares him for being king. So lesson 1, David and Goliath, 1 Samuel chapter 17. Start at the first few verses. Said, "Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle, and were gathered together at Shokoth, which belongeth to Judah, and pitched between Shokoth and Azekah and Ephes-dammim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together, and pitched by the valley of Elah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on the other side. And there was a valley between them." Okay. So, we have King Saul and his army on a mountain, or on a hillside over here. We have the Philistines, one of their great fighters being Goliath, on the other side. The valley down below, that's the typical way where people would meet. When you're up on a hill, if the Philistines would decide, hey, let's go attack the Israelites, they would have to go through the valley, at which time the Israelites could see the Philistines coming and they could prepare for battle. And one knows that fighting on top of a hill is easier. So as the Philistines came up the hill, they would be at a disadvantage. So in those situations, when you're up on top of a mountain with a valley between, the enemy really doesn't want to attack. So that's why either side is really just sitting there, camped, and not really doing anything. They're not entering into battle at all, that we see here. Okay? Now, continuing on, it tells us, though, about the attempts to create a battle. Verse 4, "And there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. And he had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he is armed with a coat of mail. And the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. And he had greaves of brass upon his legs, and a target of brass between his shoulders. And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and one bearing a shield went before him. And he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel, and said unto them, Why are ye come out to set your battle in array? Am not I a Philistine, and ye servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. If he be able to fight with me and to kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then shall ye be our servants and serve us. And the Philistines said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. When Saul and all Israel heard those words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid." Okay? Now, in math, we asked today about a score. We said that was 20. Here in the Bible, it uses, for the height of Goliath, a cubit. This is only a guess. We can't be 100% sure. But how long is a cubit? Kenton, what are you guessing here? Demonstrating. For a grown man, sometimes it would be the estimated from an elbow to the fingertips. Now, if you had to estimate from my elbow to my fingertips, how long is that in the measuring systems that we use, feet and inches? How long do you guess mine is? Kenton? I would go with 1.5 feet as a great estimate. 18 inches. So let's do the math. 6 cubits then would be 6 feet plus then 6 times 6 inches. So that'd be another 3 feet. This man, Goliath, would have stood approximately 9 feet tall. Okay? Some of the tallest people in the world, and we look up in the world record books, are 7 foot something, 7'10", 7'11". I have to look up, maybe there's even been someone who's been 8 foot. But 9 foot, that's a tall man. And we know there were giants in the land. If you remember the spies who went to the land gave that report that there were large men. And that's what these men were. Goliath was not only probably large in stature, but why would the Bible list the weights of his armor and the size of his spear? What do you think? What's the point of that? Colin?
Help us understand how big and strong he really was.
Right? This man wasn't just a tall, scrawny guy. And that's what we see a lot of times when we see a tall person. Maybe you see him on the basketball court. You know, they're 7'10" tall, but boy, they're skin and bones. Okay? There's not a lot of muscle to him. This man was not that way. He was tall, and Goliath was also strong and thick. He could carry a lot of weight in his weapons. The staff was like a weaver's beam. That's a huge piece of wood that would be used. We remember that beam that would be used in Samson's hair. It had so much weight. And here this man could use it as a staff, just as though it were a stick to you and me. Okay? The idea there is trying to get across, as Colin said, to paint us the picture. God wants to know just how strong and large this man was. And Goliath, of course, he challenged the Israelites. Rather than having both of our armies come down and fight so that 10,000 of you die and 10,000 of our guys die, and maybe no one, let's just solve the problem this way. I, Goliath, will be down in the valley, and you, the Israelites, choose one man and send him down, and we will fight 1-on-1. And whoever wins the battle, the other guys will become the servants. Well, who does that benefit? More than likely, who's going to win there? Brody? Goliath. And he knows it. That's why he can say these things. That's why we read there in verse 10, defy the armies. He was speaking ungodly words, words that he knew should make any Christian man angry. We talked about courage this morning in reading. The men of Israel should have had courage to stand up when they heard those words used that way. Oh, it already popped out. Yeah. So, courage was necessary. But we don't see anybody in Israel demonstrating courage here, do we? So, no one's going to go out and fight against Goliath, this Philistine. They know that it would be foolish. Now, in the next following verses, and we won't read all the way through them because it's quite a length, and for the sake of time, we want to go over them. But in that army of the Israelites were 3 young men, and they were sons of Jesse. They probably had a tent that they stayed together in, probably fought in the same part of the battle in the army. And those 3 brothers had a younger brother at home named David. David was a shepherd. He cared for the sheep, his father's sheep. He tended to them out in the fields while his brothers were gone. But Father Jesse was curious. He wanted to know, how are my sons doing? How is the battle going? And he also wanted to send them some provisions. He knows that probably the food that these young men are getting are not very healthy, or maybe it's not enough. And so he's probably concerned for his son's safety. I want my sons to go into battle strong, not weak because they haven't had enough food. So I will send my youngest son, David. I'll send him to the camp of the Philistines and the Israelites, and he can bring food to my sons. Okay? So David does that. He takes a gift of food that we see. He goes to the camp. Okay? And when he arrives at the camp, okay, he finds his brethren. But before that, he comes across, and we don't know exactly where he is, but he's somewhere on his journey, and he sees down there, maybe he's up on the hillside, he sees down in the valley, he can see Goliath. And there's Goliath, probably with his hands together, shouting up to the camps of Israel. And David can see, and he can hear what Goliath is saying. And he hears the words. They're words that he should never hear. They're words that prick his heart, that offend him. How can someone say that about so-and-so? about my God. We might think, you would become offended if someone was cursing and swearing, not directly to your parents, but behind their back. Or maybe they had something mean to say about some of your siblings. You would not be happy. In fact, you might even stand up for them and say something. You might be angry. And that's what David was here in his heart. When he heard Goliath say these words, he was angry with Goliath. But he was also upset that no one in Israel came marching out down that hill and said, now listen here, Goliath. That's not the way that you behave. That's not the way that you speak about my God. And I am going to make sure that doesn't... You see, no man really had the faith to believe that I can march down out of this hill and God will use me, He will protect me to challenge this Philistine. Or at least to let this Philistine know that those words that he's saying are ungodly, are wrong. They were depending on their own selves. They were probably back, Saul and his leaders were probably back in their tents scheming. All right, let's see if we take this group of 500 men and we flank around over here. And then we take this group of 2,000 and we send them down the middle. And let's see if we put the horsemen and the chariots over here. You see, they were trusting in their own battle plans. They were forgetting to have faith in God, that He would give them the victory, that He would defeat Goliath and the Philistines. But again, that's God and His providence wanted David to be the one to kill Goliath. So, David here is amazed, he's shocked, he finds it unbelievable that nobody dares to go out and rebuke this man for what he has done. So, if we look at verse 26, what is David's response when he finally arrives at the army by his brethren? Verse 26, and David spoke to the men that stood by him, saying, what shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine, and taketh away this reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, meaning this ungodly Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? Again, that he should speak this way. And the people answered after him after this manner, saying, so shall it be done to the man that killeth him. They say, he'll receive a great reward. And Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spake unto the men. So his brethren were close. And Eliab's anger was kindled against David, and he said, why camest thou down hither? And with whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know the pride and the naughtiness of thy heart, for thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle. And David said, what have I now done? Is there not a cause? So, picture yourself I think a good situation to picture yourself is sitting out in a hunting blind. Opening day. You woke up at the crack of dawn. You've been preparing for this day for a long time. And you're sitting out there. You made sure you got your scent lock clothes on, right? You don't want a deer to smell you from a mile away. So you had it hanging out on this. I mean, you've done everything possible to make sure that there's no way a deer knows that you're there. You got there at 5:30 in the morning before the sun comes. You've been sitting there for 2 long hours waiting quietly until finally the break of dawn will come, in which you hope somewhere out there over the sight of your gun you can see a big buck, right? You're sitting there quiet, ready, you're all by yourself. It's peaceful, it's calm, and it's just about time. And all of a sudden, Trent comes running into Logan's. Hey, Logan! Or maybe it's Aubrey. Hey, Amber! Hey, you forgot to take me along. You left me at home. You snuck out of the house. What just happened to all your chances at deer, Logan? They went out the window. All that preparation that you've been doing for a week, getting your clothes ready, you got up at the crack of dawn. And so what do you do to your little brother or little sister? Get out of here. You're ruining it. You have no reason to be here. Get out of here. Don't you have something? Didn't Mom tell you needed to go do this? Clean up your bedroom or something. Didn't Mom tell you to pick up the toys? What are you doing out here? Get out of here. You're ruining it for me. Okay? Or maybe you have friends over at your house and your little brother or sister is embarrassing you or they're being annoying, right? And you tell them, just get out of here. Well, that's what Eliab is doing. That's what David's older brother is saying. He's saying, get out of here. You're just being here curious. You're just being nosy. How many times have you told that to your younger brother or sister, right? You're just here being nosy. You just want to know what's going on. Oh, yeah. How many times did Jared have to tell you that? Right? A few. You're just here because you just want to be nosy. That's what Eliab is saying to David here. Okay? So, well, David doesn't go, well, yes, Brother Eliab, whatever you say. No, he challenges them. Okay? And he's so bold in what he says that the words that he said get repeated by man after man after man through the army until finally someone high up in the army who is able to go before the presence of Saul goes, yeah, there's this boy in camp, and he's out there belly aching about why no one will do anything to Goliath, and he's being bold and bragging about all the things that he's done. And, well, what's the harm, Saul probably thinks. Bring him in. Bring him in. Let's hear what he has to say. So, David is brought in before Saul. David is bold. He says to Saul, I'll go fight them. I'm not going to let a man stand out there and curse my God. I'll go fight him. And Saul, of course, well, you can't win. When you lose, if you lose, all of Israel will become the servants of the Philistines. You think we're going to risk that, sending a small boy like you, a shepherd boy, out there? David, of course, had to convince Saul of his faith, but also of how the Lord was with him. Verse 34, take a look there. Here's David's convincing argument to Saul. And David said unto Saul, Thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went out after him, and smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God. You know what that reminds me of? That also reminds me of your younger brother and sister. Because what do they think they can do? They can do anything, right? They're bold. I'll climb it, or I'll go there, or I'll do it. Now, when you actually get there, then they kind of chicken out. Well, I don't want to do that. But right, they're bold. They're not afraid, and that's what we see here in David. He is not afraid of the Philistine because he has faith in his heart that the Lord is on his side. And I will not be afraid of that Philistine. Look at what the Lord has done for me when I was a shepherd boy. A lion and a bear had tried to steal away one of my father's sheep, and I slew them with my bare hands and a knife. Well, God is working here in His providence. The Lord works in Saul's heart so that Saul decides this young boy, this shepherd boy, will be the one to go out into battle against the Philistine. Here, let's put on him a helmet because he's probably going to get his head attacked. And let's try to put this armor, this chain mail all over him and a big breastplate. And let's put these sheaves on his legs to protect him. And here's a sword and And David can't move. He can't lift that sword or that spear. They're much too heavy. He's a young boy. He doesn't have the strength of a man, of a well-seasoned soldier. Rather, David probably casts off the helmet, lifts off the breastplate, sheds the sheaves, leaves the sword and the spear, and tells Saul, Saul, I don't need these things. I killed that lion and that bear with a knife in my hands. Here I have a sling. I have the Lord on my side. He will provide a way for me to defeat the enemy. So he went with his weapon of faith. That's the weapon that David was out there battling with, the weapon of faith. He went down, and we read that he chose out 5 smooth stones out of a brook, and he put them into his shepherd's bag in verse 40. And he had a sling in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. And of course, the Philistine laughs and mocks at him and curses him some more. What do you mean you come out here? Send a boy. Verse 45, we see from David, then David said to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword, and with a spear, and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied, meaning thou hast cursed and spoken ungodly about my God. You come with weapons, physical earthly weapons. I come with something in my heart, the faith and the strength of the Lord. You can't take that away from me. And that's something that we can know too. If an enemy ever comes and takes us and puts us in prison, they might be able to take our dignity. They can take our health. They can take our cleanliness. They can take our families. They can take all of our earthly possessions. But they cannot ever take the faith out of your heart. That's something that the Lord has put there. It's permanent. And that's what David has here. And we see contrasts, those different things in this situation. You talked earlier this morning, you said Rahab was an example of courage. She took in those spies. But she also failed because she failed to trust that the Lord would deliver those spies, and she had to tell a lie. David doesn't fall into that trap here. He trusts in the Lord. He has great faith. He knew that God would give him the victory. He didn't have to do anything on his own. I ask you in there to take a look at Deuteronomy chapter 20 and do that right now, verses 1 through 4. Be a great text to memorize. Deuteronomy 20, verses 1 through 4. When thou goest out to battle against thine enemies, and seest horses and chariots and a people more than thou, be not afraid of them. For the Lord thy God is with thee, which brought thee up out of the land of Egypt. And it shall be when ye are come nigh unto the battle, and the priest shall approach and speak unto the people, and shall say unto them, Hear, O Israel, ye approach this day unto battle against your enemies. Let not your hearts faint, fear not, and do not tremble, neither be ye terrified because of them. For the Lord your God is he that goeth with you to fight for you against your enemies and save you. David knew that here. He knew what was going on. He knew that the Lord was on his side. He had nothing to fear. Well, Goliath, we're told in the Bible he had a helmet. Typically, a helmet back then would probably have some type of visor that you could pull down over your face so that would cover. Or maybe it was a helmet and he had it tipped back on his head before battle. We don't know exactly. But either way, he was so confident when he saw this puny, in his mind, this puny, weak little boy, that he didn't need to cover his face. He didn't either pull his helmet down or he didn't have to pull his mask down over his face. But instead he laughs at this boy. We can see them in the battlefield, David all of a sudden taking off at a run towards the Philistine, and the Philistine probably lumbering and laughing, making sure that all his men can see, hey, watch this. And all of a sudden David, as he's running, swinging, he lets loose that stone, and that stone flies and hits the Philistine right in the forehead. Hits him right there and knocks him over. Maybe knocks him out for a minute. And he falls down. David, having no weapon to kill this great Philistine, by the strength of the Lord, picks up the sword of Goliath and takes it and uses it and drops it down over the neck of Goliath and cuts off his head, therefore killing him. Then what happens? Well, two things simultaneously happen. The Israelites up on their mountainside are in shock. But then, probably within an instant, they begin letting out war whoops and rejoicing and high-fiving each other and heading off down that hill because now they are the victors. Now they can't wait to go slay some Philistines. The Philistines who were poking and laughing a minute ago about this young boy are in utter shock. You can imagine the blood draining from their faces so they're pale. And they see the Israelites stampeding down that hill. And they must know within their hearts this was not any normal act. There was something special going on here. Now, whether they gave credit to some God they didn't know or the true God, we don't know. But the true God was at work here. And they flee, feared for their lives. There's a battle, and the Israelites won. At the end, we see that when the battle is in hand, the Israelites have the victory. David takes the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his armor in his tent. That's where he goes with the Philistine stuff. And when Saul saw David go forth against the Philistine, he said to Abner, the captain of the host, Abner, whose son is this youth? And Abner said, as thy soul liveth, O king, I cannot tell. He didn't know who he was. And the king said, inquire thou whose son this stripling is. And as David returned from the slaughter of the Philistines, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said unto him, whose son art thou, thou young man? And David answered, I am the son of thy servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite. Did Saul already know that David would be the one to replace him? We don't know. But Saul knew that from now on David would be an important man of Israel, and he's probably hoping for a man with a good, strong, powerful lineage. Whose family do you come from? Are you from a rich family up in the north? Are you from a rich family in the east with great power and might? Whose are you? No, he came from the small, maybe in Saul's mind, insignificant tribe of Benjamin. Okay? So, God is preparing David here. He's getting him closer and closer to the throne. He no longer will be spending his time back at home on the farm as a boy who is a shepherd. He's learned those skills about what it takes to be a shepherd and to care for the sheep. Now God will bring him into the home, into the palace of Saul, to prepare him for eventually being the ruler and leader of all of the people of Israel. So we see that. Goliath died. That's always a trick question. So you watch that. How did Goliath die? Maybe if you go home and ask your younger brother and sister in a couple of weeks, you might forget this. And they say, oh, David threw a sling or stone out of a slingshot and hit him in the forehead. Well, that knocked him unconscious or knocked him out. What really killed him? Kenton? Yeah, a sword. His own sword used by David is what kills us. That's always I find that commonly on, trivia, Bible trivia. It tries to be a tricky one, so prepare yourselves for it.